everyone, and welcome back to another installment of AP European History Review. This is brought to you by Student Express Review. We make these videos so that you can stress less. Today we'll be looking at Unit 3 of AP European History, which would be the Age of Absolutism. A lot going on here, so let's get right into it. So firstly, we're going to look at the state of Europe after the 30 Years' War. So the 30 Years' War ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia, and Europe shifted dramatically. The treaty, which is the Peace of Westphalia, reshaped political legitimacy and ended most of the large-scale religious conflicts. From this point forward, states become more focused on political interest rather than spiritual unity. We also see the rise of professional armies, growing tax systems, and bureaucracies, tools which will be used to strengthen centralized power that these monarchs are beginning to accrue. The major question then becomes, who should control the state, the rulers or the representative bodies? So let's define absolutism, shall we? Absolutism is a political system in which the monarch claims exclusive authority over the state, often justified by a divine right. So the key features of this include a centralized bureaucracy, a standing army loyal to the king, control of taxation, the weakening or suppression of representative bodies, and using court rituals to project royal power. These are all ways that these monarchs consolidate their rule by making sure they're not beholden to any nobles, by making sure they don't have to listen to any church or religious institution. They centralize their power and make themselves the sole authoritarian ruler in their country. So let's take a look at a few specific instances. So the first one we're going to look at is absolutism in France, which is often used as the grand model of absolutism, as we have Louis XIV, who is very famous for being an absolute monarch. So Louis XIV did a whole bunch of things that kind of make him the model. He builds the Palace of Versailles specifically to control and domesticate the nobility. He keeps them there and requires them to live under his supervision rather than returning back to their estates and their fiefdoms. So he literally requires his nobles to stay within his supervision so that they cannot plot anything against him. They're under constant scrutiny by him, and they always have to appease him. His royal government expanded the use of intendants, which are royal officials who governed provinces on behalf of the crown. So that much more, they're taking away the power of these nobles, so they are practically powerless to be able to put any challenge to Louis XIV's reign. He also revoked the Edict of Nantes, which ended the French Wars of Religion. So there is now an enforcement of religious uniformity committed to several costly expansionist wars. So the fact that Louis XIV can now kind of control religion to make it uniform and consolidate even religion as a part of his reign makes him that much more powerful. And looking at absolutism in Eastern Europe next. So Eastern absolutism takes somewhat of a different path. These states often had weaker representative bodies and slower urban development. Serfdom remained strong, which gave nobles tremendous power over peasants. Austria consolidated control after defeating the Ottomans in 1683, pushing them back into the Baltics and towards Turkey. Prussia grew into this military state with a king, as Frederick William, the Great Elector, taxed without consent and built a powerful army. In return, Prussian nobles, called the Junkers, kept authority over their serfs, and Frederick the Great later expanded both the military and state reforms. Now, the other big example of absolutism is in Russia, with a kind of a different spin on it. So the main figure here is Peter the Great. He embraced this aggressive westernization. So looking at how Europe is being successful, what they're doing correct, and modeling that within the Russian state, technologically, culturally, in whatever way he can. So Peter reorganized the army, navy, updated dress and bureaucracy, and introduced the table of ranks, tying noble status to state service. He founded St. Petersburg as Russia's new capital, which allowed for a warm water port that now allowed Russia to engage in serious maritime trade with the rest of Europe. And another figure who is also important here is Catherine the Great, who came after Peter the Great. She had a lot more Enlightenment ideas, but still reinforced this noble privilege and expanded the empire of Russia. So there is a competing model of government in this age, though, which is constitutionalism. Unlike absolutism, constitutionalism limits the ruler's power by law and shares authority with representative institutions. So this model kind of emphasizes rule of law, civil rights, religious toleration, and growing political voice for merchants and the gentry. And it emerges more strongly in the Dutch Republic and England, which we'll go into each here in a minute. So, starting with the Dutch Republic is a commercialized powerhouse built on a decentralized government. Power mostly belongs to wealthy merchant oligarchies, and religious toleration attracts immigrants who fuel economic growth, so it's this repeating cycle. Amsterdam becomes a major financial center, home of the Bank of Amsterdam, a center of Dutch art. All that flourishes during this kind of called a Dutch Golden Age, with artists like Rembrandt and Vermeer. And also, we've got England, who has a bit of a crisis with their monarchy. So in England, the House Stuart has maintained the monarchy. James I and Charles I attempt to establish an absolute rule, claiming a divine right. So the parliament resists, leading to conflicts over religion, taxation, and political authority. And this all culminates in the English Civil War, where at the end of which, spoiler alert, Charles I is executed, and England briefly becomes a military dictatorship under Cromwell. The monarchy is restored in 1660, but with clear limits, which will lead to the Glorious Revolution. The Glorious Revolution permanently establishes a constitutional monarchy. James II is removed, and William and Mary take the throne under the condition that they accept the English Bill of Rights, establishing the document requires parliamentary consent for taxation, guarantees free elections, and forbids maintaining a standing army without Parliament's approval. And the ideas of John Locke are very strong here. The ideas of natural rights and the right to resist tyranny strongly influence this settlement. John Locke will become more important when it comes to all the big revolutions, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, but we're already starting to see these ideas take shape now. So, finishing that, let's move on to our multiple choice practice. So, let's take a look here. So the first question we have is, Louis XIV's construction of the Palace of Versailles primarily served which of the following political purposes? Is it A, to provide a centralized location for mercantile guilds to negotiate trade regulations? Is it B, to weaken noble independence by requiring their presence at court, rituals, and ceremonies? Is it C, to symbolize the triumph of the Catholic Church over Protestant groups in France? Is it D, to secure France's northern border by relocating the royal residence closer to the Netherlands? I'll give you a moment to answer. So the correct answer would be B in this instance. So let's go through them. Starting with A, it says to provide a centralized location for mercantile guilds to negotiate trade regulations. That would be something that would be more aligned with the Dutch position. This is not something that France was super interested in. Louis XIV wanted to consolidate his individual rule. He wasn't interested in much mercantile interests. Moving to C, to symbolize the triumph of the Catholic Church over Protestant groups in France. Mostly the religious conflicts are over with. After the 30 Years' War, there hasn't been much religious conflict between Protestants and Catholics. So this isn't a super topical answer. And then lastly, D, to secure France's northern border by relocating the royal residence closer to the Netherlands. This just simply isn't correct. The Netherlands wasn't a super major concern for France at the time, and like I said, Louis XIV wanted to consolidate his own. So the correct answer would be B. He wanted to weaken noble independence by requiring their presence at court rituals and ceremonies. He could keep an eye on them and prevent them from undermining his rule in any way. Moving on to the second question, which of the following best reflects a key political outcome of the Glorious Revolution of 1688? Is it A, the monarch gained the ability to raise taxes without parliamentary consent? Is it B, the Church of England was abolished in favor of religious pluralism? Is it C, political authority shifted towards Parliament through the establishment of a constitutional monarchy? Or is it D, the Crown centralized military power by creating a large, permanent, standing army? Give you a moment to answer. The correct answer would be C. Let's go through. So starting with A, the monarch gained the ability to raise taxes without parliamentary consent. This is the opposite of what happened in the Glorious Revolution. The Glorious Revolution was the embracement of constitutionalism, which required the monarchy to gain parliamentary consent to do a lot of things. So this is the opposite of what actually happened. B, the Church of England was abolished in favor of religious pluralism. Now, we are getting slightly more progressive on the toleration of religion, but we're not quite there yet. The Church of England still has a pretty strong hold on England. So, not a whole lot's changing there, so that would not be a correct answer. Moving on to D. The Crown centralized military power by creating a large, permanent, standing army. Again, this is not something that constitutionalism really does. The Crown doesn't have the power to create their own standing army. That's something that would need to be going through Parliament, and not something the Crown is super interested in post-English Civil War. So the correct answer would be C. Political authority shifted towards Parliament through the establishment of a constitutional monarchy. Pretty simple there. And moving on to the last question. Which of the following developments best explains why the Dutch Republic became a major commercial and financial center in the 17th century? Is it A, its monarchs implemented mercantilist policies that tightly regulated domestic guilds? Is it B, its decentralized political structure allowed merchant oligarchies to dominate economic policy? Is it C, the Dutch Estates General created a national standing army that protected overland trade routes? Or is it D, strict Calvinist orthodoxy led to the expulsion of religious minorities who threatened economic competition? Give you a moment to answer. The correct answer would be B. Let's go through them. So starting with A, its monarchs implemented mercantilist policies that tightly regulated domestic guilds. Again, the Dutch Republic wasn't a monarchical structure, they were more constitutional, and while they were mercantilist, they weren't super implemented on the they weren't super focused on the regulation of domestic guilds. Quite the opposite in that sense. Moving on to C, the Dutch Estates General created a national standing army that protected overland trade routes. While I'm sure they could get behind protecting overland trade routes, but they, again, with constitutionalism, creating a national standing army is not something that is readily available for them to do. And besides, the Dutch mostly conducted maritime trade, not overland trade. So that answer would be incorrect. And looking at D, strict Calvinist orthodoxy led to the expulsion of religious minorities who threatened economic competition. Again, post 30 Years' War, there isn't much religious conflict. This isn't something that we're going to be seeing much after the Unit 2, which is the age of the Protestant Reformation and all that. So we're not going to be seeing much religious conflict from here on out. So the correct answer would be B. The decentralized political structure allowed merchant oligarchies to dominate economic policy. That's something the constitutionalist commercial republic can get behind. And with that, we are at the end of our review. Thank you all so much for watching, and remember, to keep your studying up, and I hope you all do well on the AP exam. I'll see you in the next installment.